Hello everyone, welcome back to the Biggening Corporation. We are on the 16th episode, and just to recap as usual, we are making an incremental game using Business Central as the engine, where players will use bots to create transactions to generate wealth and compete with each other each season to generate the most wealth. So today's goal is to dive back into the code. We spent a little bit of time last week mapping out some of the different processes and what data are we going to need to have. And it became really apparent that there are a couple of infrastructure things that we should take care of that are going to be very necessary to actually effectively test this solution. So we're going to take care of a couple of the infrastructure things. For example, I mentioned that we had the posting dates for our transactions that we put in as test transactions in our test player 5 company. We had the posting date coming in as the current date as of the stream, which we obviously need that to be the game date rather instead. So we're going to change up some code today to try to support that, and we're going to test to make sure that that actually does what it needs to do in the job queue automatically as part of the eventing. If it does not, then we need to add some functionality to the job queue to change to the correct date. Not a big deal, but something we need to do. Okay, and we've also had throughout the past few episodes, I've doodled up in virtual whiteboard style a couple of different Word documents here and there, or starting to accumulate actionable items into notes. The equivalent of, as I'm teaching, I'm sticking post-it notes up on the wall behind me of let's remember to get back to this later, and that's going to get messy. We now have our original scope document with lots of the different requirements, which somewhat translate to actionable items, but there are things that we knew in there that had to be addressed that are not yet addressed. We also have the episode 8 breakdown of some of the different things that need to happen, and then on Friday, in our previous episode, we also started jotting down some of the things that we're going to need to handle in the transaction creation process. So it has been a long-running stream that we're accumulating action items in an unstructured way. And that's not really a good thing, especially since we're not working on this 8 hours a day until we're done. This is something we're working on over time. So one of the secondary goals that I just wanted to touch on, but not necessarily spend a huge amount of time on screen on, is I am going to make use of Trello. It's something that I've used for kind of action tracking in the past, since it gives us a nice little card-based way to track some different action lists. I will update a lot of the different links in the system so that this action board is public and folks will be able to see that. So I will probably be working on that for a little while tomorrow. And speaking of which, tomorrow, which I will mention on Twitter, I am not available to stream, unfortunately, at any time, so our first missed day coming up tomorrow. Yeah, so a lot of these action items that we've identified on stream or we've generated some notes on are going to become action items that we are going to see here. And when we get back together on Wednesday, we'll revisit this board and see how it all worked out, and also hopefully I'll show an interesting technique for a rolling project if you haven't used it before. So Right. Let's start with one of the core things that we know we are going to need, but we're not 100% sure how it will work yet. We saw that when we created test transactions in Business Central, it is defaulting the posting date to the work date, which makes perfect sense. That's the point of the thing. And the challenge that we have is that when we sign out and sign in, when we sign in, I believe it sets the work date back to the I think at the moment it's doing preserving my previous settings. Yeah, I think so. So we know that the work date is getting set to the current date when we log out and log in. We know that the job queue is also going to use that work date functionality, so we need to make sure two things today. We need to make sure that when users are logging into the UI, whether it be mobile or web, that the work date is updated in that UI so that flow fields work correctly and all that sort of thing. And we'll test to see if that event also affects the job queue, whether or not that whether or not the job queue is affected by the workday change during a login event trigger. If it's not, then we have additional code that we need to do in our job queues. So let's take a look at that. Now, for this one, there's not really a great folder in this infrastructure that to me makes perfect sense because this is going to affect both the system administrator and the player. So for the moment, I'm just going to pop the new code unit into our main source folder here. And I'm going to keep the scope of this code unit pretty narrow. As a matter of fact, let's see if we can go ahead and do that. I think that's slightly too long. Maybe it's not. We'll see. Finish. Okay, cool. Now what we're going to do is we're going to have this tiny little code unit do one simple job, and we're going to keep it that narrow of a scope. Some people even advocate that a code unit is ideally a single exposed method and serves that one method's purpose, because particularly in the cloud where there is no licensing requirement on code units, it allows you to be much more granular in your development. On-prem, there's a little bit more licensing implication, but I get it. So, in our case, thankfully, there is a login management code unit that has events on it we can make use of. In our case, we'll use onAfterCompanyOpen. If I did not know that already off the top of my head, how would I have figured that out? I probably would have looked to, there are some options where you can record what events happen. I probably would have used that and then simply just logged into the system and seen all the event chain that happened as a part of that login procedure. So if it's something that you're going, how would I have known that login management exists? Watch for the event subscribers. If you aren't sure, event recording. There are some different tools available. Event recorder. That's our jam. So there is an event recorder that you can watch to see what happens and what sequence of things. And that can give you an idea of what events should I be potentially hooking into when I'm doing different operations. So that can be a real big help to us. Okay. A little redundant, but sure. Okay, and our current game date is on the company information record, so nice and easy. After the company is open, if we get and company info dot current game date does not equal 0D. I'm missing a paren. Sometimes the code validation on things will take a moment or two to go through. If that's the case, then we can simply call workdate. This is a function. We typically use it just as like this, with no parameters to get back the workdate, but it also accepts a new date to set. So, nice and easy. Yeah, that's it. I don't want to do anything crazy, like if there isn't company info set up or there isn't a game date yet, I don't need to throw an error. For example, we might be in the Kronos company. We don't need this there. So for now, I don't think there's any value to error handling. Just a nice simple and. Okay. As a couple of folks have correctly pointed out on Twitter, you can, in this case, we're chaining. I don't do a lot of ands if I potentially want to change a logic, but you'll notice that I'm using a record variable .get. If this fails, then, no big deal. It's already false and away we go. But it can do that function call, and then we can, now once we get to this and step, that is true, therefore this will have the value as a result of the get. So the get executes first, returns its value, and then we can do the field name variable. So some good chatter on Twitter about that today, which is an oddly delightful ecosystem for our little industry. I do enjoy it. Okay, so now we should have a relatively straightforward adjustment in here that right now when we log into a company, which now we need to sign out, when we log into a company, it should update the work date to the game date. Yeah, and it did. Now, we also need to be cognizant of the fact that the game is ticking along. So, for example, maybe in a minute, the game date will change, and here I am still sitting on the wrong work date. From a player perspective, that's not the worst thing in the world, but, it still could be confusing. So, let's go to our player company and the heartbeat listener, and we've got this little routine in here is running, and it says, okay, if the current, this is our routine that pulls from the master company to look at the data per company false game setup game date, checks to see it against the current game date, and if it is off, it fires the heartbeat event that our bot system is using, and it updates the current game date. Now, one of the things that I'm realizing right here is that sequence of events is a bad one. We should be triggering the heartbeat event after we've modified the current game date. So, alright, good stuff. That could have been confusing later, so we just, yay. I feel like I should keep a bug count of bugs we managed to save ourselves from finding the hard way. Okay. So, great. If the So probably our best bet, I was going to say we could go ahead right in here and update the work date, but that would only affect the job queue under which this heartbeat listener is running, so that doesn't help us. If the player is logged in, realistically, we need to subscribe to that heartbeat as well. Okay, makes sense. So, easy enough. And we want the player heartbeat listener code unit. And we've got our on heartbeat event. Easy peasy. Occasionally I goof up and just forget to tab through these, which would be the much easier way to do that. And then once I've done that, I've lost it. Wait. Okay. Alrighty. And since the player is logged in, update player work date. And we can do the same exact chunk of code, which if we're copying and pasting code, guess what we're doing? We're functioning it. So instead of copying and pasting from here, we're cut and pasting it down here, and up here we can then just call the update workdate function, and here we can call the update workdate function. Away we go. And now this means that when the game ticks over in the background, the player's workdate here in the foreground will get updated at the same time, so the player is always in sync with the game. That'll be a pretty useful thing to do. I don't know if we'll be displaying any information on the role center of the player with the current game date. We might though, so we'll have to think about that, like what triggers that refresh when we get there. Okay, so now we have the challenge of the bots are theoretically humming along in the background. We've got our dispatcher code unit chugging those all along as well, and that's logging the activity, and it is logging the activity with the work date. So theoretically, right now, if we were to go to the activity log in our player test company here, we should see a bunch of bot activity based on today's date. Let's find out. Yeah, we do. Cool. Lots and lots and lots because it's been chugging along. So let's filter this. Actually, let's just sort it the other way. Here. Well, that was quick. Cool. Good news for us, we didn't even have to set up the test scenario. In the intervening time I was babbling about events and player UI, the job queue had run in the background, and we can see that the posting date on these research points that it would generate 50 has updated. And it is now posting based on the game date. Okay. Well, I thought we were going to have to spend a few more minutes creating the test scenario to force to take this over and see that the posting date was updated, but we just answered one of those questions, so fantastic. Alright, so the login management on after company open will affect a job queue. I've never had to ask that question before, so now I know. Now you do too. Alright, I like it. Okay, so that's one off the to-do pile. Let's close things up for a moment and take a look at what we were doing last here. Okay. So we have some more things that need to get included into our setup area of the world, and we have some code units here. So this is the code unit where we're doing the data duplication, but we also had our code unit for player management that was generating the companies. That's cool. Yep. Okay. Makes perfect sense there. And then we also had the player company and knit code unit. Yeah, this is our jam. Okay, so we had the functionality to copy the setup company. Great. And we have some routines here to copy the research. I feel like we ran into a bug on Friday, but I might have lost it. Oh no. Danger of trying to stream after a work day. Okay, so we were plugging along here, and there was, that was the issue. It was possible for us in the player company initialization here, or player management, that we would try to run the routine to generate the player company, where we would initialize the player company, insert it, and then we would try to populate all the data, because after all, the company got inserted, and we have a trigger on that, but we don't catch before we create the company if it's a master company where the data could be copied from or not. And we were having the issue when we were in test company 5 and we went to player management, it blew up a little bit and said, hey, we can't copy this data, you're in the wrong type of company, etc., etc. So we've got this function out here that checks to see if the company info is a master company to use for a data source. And I'm thinking that we really do need this function in a few other places as a safety check. So we're going to move that out to a method code unit as well. And let's create that as a quick little new code unit. PCS is master code company. And that's all it's going to do. Because we are going to use that in a few other places. And we're going to shorten the method name on this because this is a method code unit, so it's kind of okay to have like the full function name and then a shortcut method name. That's okay. Cool. So now we should be able to delete that call here, which is going to cause it to blow up, which is okay. Let's grab the is master company code unit, and there isn't any official subtype for a code unit that contains a single method. It's more just a design pattern that the community uses here and there, and it is handy for that. So instead of calling the function here, we then just do like that, and it will effectively work the same. But like I said, it's really handy for doing very small discrete bits of code functionality that you're going to use in lots of different places. This can and historically has been rolled into like one big giant management code unit. I'm trying to personally break a little bit away from doing that for some of the functions here. I think this will be a little bit easier. If I understand correctly, a lot of the testing techniques that are out there for testing services do better when you're doing single function code units like this. Method code units, whatever they're referred to as. So, okay. Alrighty. So what we now want to do is, in our player management, the main function call, the setup new player, we will now steal that little bit of code where we say is master company. And then we would potentially want to throw an error. For the moment, I'm going to do the ugly exit with no feedback. And I'm going to do that one. That's fine. Our to-do pile slowly growing. Getting a good number. I wish there was like a total count up here. That would be kind of fun to see what our total was for the... Oh. That's actually not too shabby. I kind of like that. Every once in a while stuff's in the command palette, so for giggles I like to check, but theoretically we can export this out. It's alright, it's fine, not urgent at the moment. Okay, so we now know that we've got the activity log ticking along. From a player perspective we're okay, and we fixed a bug in our player management, and we caught a separate bug along the way too. So that's cool. Alright, great. I think those were the main core infrastructure things I wanted to do today. For anyone who enjoyed last episode but wanted to share the subset of the translate functionality, I have written that up as a written blog post as well, and that went up on my Twitter, LinkedIn, etc. earlier today. So hopefully, if that's of value to you, you can pass that on to colleagues and whatnot. It's a step-by-step guide of what we went over for about 15 minutes in the last episode, or maybe the one before, something along those lines. Okay, so the next up on my to-do is I wanted to talk just a little tiny bit about Trello and how I'm going to make use of that for what we're doing here, because we're accumulating lots of to-dos in lots of places, and I'm okay with the little snippet to-dos in the code. I think that's kind of okay that we can see that list here and maybe take action on it here, and I think we'll work with that. But I want to have also a structured visibility into what's next, what are we wanting to remember but not forget for later. For example, there's nowhere where I've noted some of the data setup that we need to do for the different tiers and the bot material requirements. So let's structure this in, which, by the way, Microsoft has a competing product to this, I would say, kind of competing product to this, Microsoft To-Dos. That, when I tried it out in its infancy a little while back, I want to say a year ago, was not ready for prime time yet. I have been seeing a lot of stuff in the past 6 months of that to-dos functionality in the Microsoft Office 365 ecosystem is coming along really strong, especially if you utilize Teams in your environment. However, for me, I am doing this particular project as a funsies sort of thing, not using my organizational resources, so I am not going to try out that Teams to-do system for that. Plus, I have a real easy familiarity with how a public Trello works. Folks will be able to see this, so this feels like a good setup. So we have some code functionality needs. That's good. And we have data setup that we need to do. We have additionally on top of that, just take a look here. We've got data setup, we've got workflow. Okay, and I think everything there falls into that category for now. Code functionality, data setup, and then we'll break out user interface elements as a separate to-do pile on this one. And then I'm going to make sure we have a nice slush file for V2 Just a way of keeping track of things that are going to be good and I would like to do. I'll actually go ahead and call that V2 and beyond, because there are a bunch of things I could see us trying to do. And bugs, known issues, which I'm just using this for the moment to track for what I know needs to be done. After all, we have the lovely GitHub issues list, so this won't be a life cycle thing. This is just things I know we have problems with at the moment. So, okay, great. So the way this works from, let's say, for example, data setup, things we identified on our last video here, we have some setup items that need to be addressed in our infrastructure. So, master company data. You can just use this as a simple checklist, but where each card can work as an individual element. It will slowly be able to archive them as they get complete. But we can also now I feel like I'm going crazy. Wasn't there? Okay. Now I'm going nuts here, because I was sure that we used to be able to create this into a bullet list of items. Huh. Okay. I wonder if there have been some feature changes on some of the board settings. Because there used to be the ability to have card details, and you could set work lists and descriptions and all that sort of stuff on the cards. That was part of the point of this. So now I'm a little annoyed, like, excuse me. I'm going to be sad if they went ahead and put that into they might have put that behind a pro setting, since this is free. That would be frustrating. Okay. Yeah. It's not like there's an extensive amount of UI settings that you can do with this. Okay, I will try to figure that out, because I am certain that there was the ability to have descriptive information, because that's the whole point of this being a title. Brilliant. Okay, every once in a while you just gotta refresh your browsers, because that was what was going on there. Let's archive those. They don't need to be here. So, okay. Anyways, what I was going for here is that we can turn this into a nice, simple checklist here of areas. For example, we know that we need units of measure, and we need number series, and we're going to need sales and receivable setup, purchase and payable setup, tax posting group came up, and then we had the the general ledger setup. So effectively just trying to keep track of all the different things that we identified in a bit more structured way, rather than just constantly creating more and more Word documents of notes and things. And then we separately had the gen posting setup, which was per location. So that's a bit of a to-do there. Okay, so now that's a little more useful, and we can see that we have 0.7 of that. So I'm going to, off camera, I'm not going to make you sit here and watch me restructure bullet points into cards. Off camera, I will update all of these various pieces and notes and to-dos and things like that into a working board, so that way you can see where we're going. One of the things that I think I will do, just because a big part of the functionality to this project is the ability to see how different things work. I have already in the past done a couple of development things against the Trello API, so I think it would be fun as part of maybe V2 type thing. Release notes in a Trello API. That could be cool. And GitHub has some interesting functionality to APIs as well, of course. So I think that it would be great to be able to file bug reports via the UI inside of the game, because why not? Let's build a community source library, probably as a separate little extension, that just hits up these two things. Build them on stream, release them, and people can have fun with it. I think having an issue API standard for the community would be delightful, and I would love people to help with that. Yeah, so I think there'll be some fun things that we'll do with that. Like I want to, as part of my project, just because I spent a lot of time in Angular, I want to. It probably won't be Angular, but it'll be JS. There's GraphJS that would be fun to show the tech tree as part of the UI on that. If you haven't worked with this, it is super easy. Did they update to? I may be thinking of Chart.js. I might be thinking of Chart.js. Yeah, so they've got a lot of different useful ways that you can document like workflows and things like that. So there are some UI elements that I would like to map out a tech tree using this. So we're going to include that in version 1 because I think that'll be worth doing. It'll show how to do a custom add-in control, and that will be, I think, very useful. Great, so that will be a to-do on my part to tidy this up. It's part of my day tomorrow, unfortunately, includes several hours on a train, so there's something for me to do while I'm riding along. For those of you who are in Europe, yes, I will be wearing a mask that whole time. Don't worry. It's not the official government recommendation here in the country, but yep, doing it anyways. Okay, so you can see, and part of why I was waiting for this is we can see now that that job queue is ticking along. All of our research bots are incrementing based on the work date now. So that is delightful. That is great news. Okay. And all of these research bots are currently not researching anything useful in this company, of course, because we haven't finished that tech tree yet, but that's okay. All right. Yeah. So, let's see what we should do for the next little bit. We have some to-dos coming out of our last round of videos here that we can still test some things out. We know that in our test company right now, we've got a customer, a vendor, and an item and a location all set up and working. So we can work our way from the top of the pile, creating a purchase order, hard coding it temporarily to force it to use those existing items, just so that way we know that the workflow is working. So let's make our purchasing bot actually do some, well, purchasing. Let's see, if we look at our bot list, do we have a purchasing bot in this company? We do not. That's fine. I still have our bot list directly editable rather than our buy bot. So for example, sure. Okay, so now we've got a purchasing bot and it'll do 2 operations per day. Cool, that's fine. It's going to add power per day. Yeah. All right, so for our reference, let's see here, and I'm just going to use my notepad just to keep track off with my second screen what we've got for our items and locations in this test company, because I don't remember exactly what codes we used. Okay, so we have location, basic 1. Helps if I can type today, but how often can we type when we demo things? So our vendor is vtest1, and our item, I think this is just the 1000 item. Yep, cool. Okay, now what we don't have at the moment, even though we've started to talk about it in the past, what we don't have is what the purchasing maximums are for bots and vendors and all that sort of thing. I don't need to test that so much as I want to test that our document can be created. The quantity we can handle separately. That's no big deal. Okay, so we've got our standard template, just throw away bot template here, and all it's doing is saying what it would do. Well, that's cool and all, but we now need to create some new procedures. Do I have... Yeah, I do. I haven't used it much in this series, but I find it really valuable. There's a little extension that I love that comes in really handy when you're working with this on a full resolution screen. Why is this off a little center here? There we go. Sorry about that. One of the things I really like is this map on the right here is fantastic. It's not always clear when you're dealing with a large chunk of code what section, what parts are in. I have a little extension that is called banner comments that I like by Luna. Nice and simple. I really like banner comments. Yeah, okay. So create PO, and if I recall correctly, there we go. It bumps it into a little visible descriptive. Good old-fashioned ASCII art. It's you can change some different settings with it. So if you're not a fan of exactly how that one came out, which in this case for me that wasn't quite the one I wanted. This is a very long list, but I'll have to post a little later. There are some that I like to use that are really great. This one's pretty decent. Okay, and so you can see over here on the right, you get this really nicely readable chunk, and then you can kind of separate your code and see in the map where it is. It's a little silly, I'll not lie, but I think it's very handy for me when I'm trying to find something in several hundred lines of code. What are we looking for? So, okay, so we'll create, and I'm going to have all these be local procedures for our testing purpose. For not for testing purposes, but for like the bot itself is only going to be calling this. So create a PO, and then we will additionally have a function for creating the line. This creates a little, I'm presuming that blank space at the bottom is for hanging glyphs like G and such, but that's fine. Local procedure. And we'll take in of our PO header, which is technically purchase header, so let's be good and name it based on what it is. Try to follow some standards here. Okay. Alright, so we are going to here need purchase header, which will be a rec. Okay, so our initial handling of this is that we are hard coding in this vendor because we're just testing, can we produce and post a document. We don't need configuration settings just yet, but we will eventually. So we will take in vendor number, which will be a code 20. And when we call the create PO up here, we will hard code the call in the run inside the loop. So there we are. Okay, that works. So now we are going to purchase header init. This will always be clear, so we don't really need to do an init here. It is a local variable, it clears every function call, so we should be able just to do insert true. Now, in theory, I believe the purchase header, if we look at the code behind this, I believe it does the validation to say, okay, you know what, if the number is not there, oh, no, cool. They've got the on validate for the buy from vendor number, doing the record numbering as well. Oh, that's good. Okay, cool. Well, shoot, never mind. Let's do that. All right. I think one of my phones, the Google Assistant, processed my OK cool then as OK Google. That was pretty funny. And I woke it up again. Brilliant. A friend of mine has a lot of fun testing out what different things he can say to make it pick up the I think his favorite was something like validated poodles or something. It's a little bizarre. Most of the time I don't leave that function on because that means it's passively always listening. Alright, so theoretically, if we were to just let this run now, we should get a blank purchase header with nothing really to it except for the vendor number, and it should automatically get the work date and all that fun stuff. So let's see, we know that we need to have the document type, so we can't just do this call here. It's not a purchase order yet, so we need to tell it that it is a purchase order. Otherwise we're in for some bad time on the numbering. So the document type must be document type order. Alright, so we do the order, and it looked like when we validated the vendor number, then it populates the primary key for that. The location's going to validate in from the vendor number because we set that on the vendor, I believe. Let's double check that. And that will be the case. It is not. That will be the case when we generate the vendors. We're going to have the player assign them a location, and if a location is not assigned, then it should yell at them. Okay. That's fine. So now it will. That's fine. So that should be everything. And then for our testing purposes, just one line, create line, and we'll pass it the purchase header that we're working on. Okay, so now at the line level, we have the situation where we need the document type and the document number to come from the header, which on the page comes automatically due to the page filter, but it does not in code. And we have the same issue with the line number in that we have to duplicate our auto split key functionality, but that's not a big deal. So, okay. And then we'll need to validate through those different settings. So, yeah, I'm just thinking through, I think those are the only things at the moment. And then location should default from the header. Should be fine. Alright. Alright, so now here down in the line routine, we should have purchase line. Okay. And we are going to need next line number as an int. Okay. Yep. Eventually, we're going to need to come up with some different techniques to know what item number is involved in the line and all that, as well as some different options. So this is going to grow significantly. I know right now it's kind of bananas to have like these big banner text to separate these little tiny functions. These are going to grow significantly as we go through things, because we have the bots assigned to different vendors, and then there's all that sort of thing. But for now, we are just going to hard code this. We are creating a new purchase order, so next line number will be something that we might have to think about. But for the moment, we can just set that. And we'll set the purchase line document type. I don't think there's any validation on that, but we are going to validate our way through all of these fields, to be honest with you, because they're core tables and you want to be able to trigger any triggers that might be associated with that. So let's see, purchase header, document type. Again, in older code, you might see this be buried within a with purchase line do begin type thing, but that is being phased out, so it is not a good idea to add that where it isn't already. The advantage to the logic behind that, again, is going away, is that you can just do validate, and you don't have to do the dot. It's implied and implicit. Yeah. And we're going to validate all of our primary key fields first, because that's a good idea. I really doubt line number has any validation on it, but like I said, we're gonna be thorough. I'm also going to, because of the way that some of the validations work, I'm going to do this as an insert, then set my values, and then do a modify. Just because I want to make sure that that insert doesn't fail based on any primary key values, and in case that insert true defaults anything that I potentially want defaulted, like from document type and number, I don't know which validation is going to trigger pulling down the vendor related fields on the purchase line. If we look at the definition of this, it does have the buy from vendor code, just like the header, but I don't know what populates it. I believe it's an insert trigger, but as you can see, this is a 8,000 line object, so finding exactly where things are in this object could be a little bananas. Okay, so it doesn't appear to be part of the on insert trigger, but okay. yeah. So anyways, now we're going to validate the type as item, and we're hard coding because we're just testing the framework. We're going to validate our number as 1000, which requires quotes because that is a code, even though I'm entering in numeric. One of the things that will trip you up sometimes in behavior is when you validate the number field and type field, there's some really funky code on there that actually deletes and recreates the line. So just be aware that that can cause some strange behavior. And they've mostly smoothed out any downstream effects on that already, but you can see that they park the purchase line into a temporary value, and then they call init and clear all the other fields and move data back. Changing the type and changing the number have pretty dramatic effects on related fields. So be very careful about the order which you validate the document fields. It would make no sense in the world to validate the quantity or price before the type and number. Alright, let's see, quantity. Let's do a random for the moment, just because I think it'll be more interesting. I don't know, a variation of 10 plus something. Why not? Just that way we get a little variability in the ordering. This will significantly be replaced by other things, but hey, that's fine. And we're gonna do a cost of, I think we'll honestly do a similar little 10 plus a random, because why not? Okay, cool. So, yeah. Alright, well, theoretically, I'm going to comment out our result text returning the theoretical operations per day, and what I'm instead going to do is let's return from the create PO function, let's return a code 20 that is going to be the order number. And we'll exit with purchase header dot number. There we go. So once the PO is created, it spits back a code. And then here for now in on run, let's do, yeah, actually, that sounds great. We'll use our new friend, list of code. Forget the syntax of this. I think it's, nope, that was not it. There we go. That makes more sense. Okay, so, and we'll need I to be integer, sure. Alright, so for rec dot, nope, for I is equal to 1 to rec dot operations per day, do begin documents dot add create PO test vend 1. Wow. Okay, So now, when this runs, we will run for however many operations per day. We will create a PO for each operation, and we'll add it to our document list. And then here at the end, let's do doc list builder as a string builder, because I don't think we can convert a list of code to. I don't think they do a toString on this, or an append, because we have the ability to split text into a list, but I don't think we have the ability to kind of just join them together. Yeah, it's interesting. You can split text into a list, but you can't merge a list of... That's peculiar. I may go suggest that. Like, hey guys, I love this, but like a little bit more would be cool. Just a toString equivalent would be fine. But yeah, okay, well, that's fine. So yes, we will do a string builder. Now I feel like I'm going crazy. I was sure that was something that we were supposed to make more use of. Text builder. Right. Okay. Now for each doc, now in documents, we will do doc list builder dot append docnum plus comma space. Sure. Sounds fine. And we need to pre-declare our doc number. We don't need it to have a length, that's fine. My bad. Alright, there we go. And then that's nice and simple. And doc list builder. We technically, if we want to make a tidy string, need to just chop the last two characters off the list. That's the easiest way to go. Okay, you know, rather than for having to do an if the length of it is blah blah blah, just add the concatenation to the end here, and then we'll remove the last two characters. Remove doc list builder dot length. There's lots of different ways to do this, of course. Minus 2. There we go. I don't think we have to assign. Nope. It returns a boolean. Cool. All right. There we go. So our result text then equals. I think I would like a %count and then, oh, not a %count, a count plus the list of document numbers. Eventually that would be impractical. We might have 200 documents, so we wouldn't want that. But for our debugging purposes, I think that's okay. So doc list builder dot length and our documents length. And our doc list builder dot toText. Yep. And yes, this is a function. Thought. Oh, count. Cool. All right. So now when this purchase bot runs, we should get some basic purchase orders. Let's do it. Okay. So we have the purchase bot saying in the future I would make 2 purchases on 9/17 here. So yeah, let's head into our game setup and bump the date up. It has bumped up just since we've been looking, so theoretically within a few seconds we should see 9/18 somewhere in here, but I don't know that nope, I have not hit publish yet, so that would not help us if it runs before that goes. Saving does not equal publish. Saving does not also equal commit, but I've been doing the commits off screen so I can properly tag the comments and everything. Okay. Now we go to bot error log, and we see that that was in there still from the testing. That's good. And now the question is, everything still copacetic in this heartbeat listener? Yep. And it should tick over shortly. Great. Okay, so theoretically we should have ourselves the beginnings of a purchasing bot finally ticking along, creating our first transactions, hopefully. I'm impatient. Are we? Set on hold, edit. Next start date, 2 minutes ago. In process. There we go. Oh, I didn't make these. That's a good sign. That is a very good sign. Oh, we have an item, fabric parts, quantity 12, with a direct unit cost of 15. Haha, alright. And I got its location code. Now, for our next trick, does this one automatically create a buyer bot post? I have no idea. Let's find out. That'd be cool. We're going a little over, but hey, you know, our first transaction from a bot. Let's enjoy it. Okay. Alright. Well, there we are. Our first transaction created by a bot and manually posted. A significant chunk of that document was hard-coded in, which is nice and ugly and brute-forced, but nonetheless, we created the very minimum amount we needed to have a postable document, which ended up just being 2 fields, which is kind of bananas in the header. I thought we'd end up needing a lot more, but yay for setup. And then we were validating our 3 primary keys and our 4 main data pieces. So we have a lot more to do just to get the bot up and running. We definitely need to make it we need to be able to tie bots to which vendor is this bot going to be buying for, and then we need to figure out how we want to have the vendor maximum set and players be able to choose how much is being ordered. For example, I was envisioning that players would choose over here on the item card that they would get to choose in the replenishment. Planning. I keep forgetting. That they would choose here in the replenishment area what did they want the bots to order up to. And so we're going to eventually need to create some logic to go, okay, what is the calculated available inventory? What's the demand inventory plus the sales orders plus components. Based on that demand and the inventory on hand, what is the actual calculation against the reorder quantity and the inventory level that we want to track to? So there's some complexity there that we're going to need to be setting up in the what players can choose about items, and we'll probably also need to streamline the items so that players can set that more easily. But that's fine. Okay. Well, I think that is still a pretty high note to end the stream on. We have our first bot created transaction. It's not much yet, and there's a long way to go, and we still have some handling to do on trying to make the bot post those automatically for us. But they're there, and since I have things ticking along in the background, when we come back in 2 days, there are going to be a lot of open purchase orders. So we'll try batch posting and seeing if any of those fail. And we might even instead have our purchasing bot code in here rather than do one-by-one posting per document. In here, when we are done linking all of these documents in here, we may do a batch post call on all the open purchase orders and let the dispatcher do a batch post on all the open purchase documents. And that might be a lot more efficient to let the system know, hey, we're about to do a whole bunch of posting. So we might save that for next time. I think that will be a great place to be in. Okay, well, I will see you all in a couple of days, and between now and then I will update the GitHub and Twitter with the link to the Trello board that I'll be busily working on tomorrow. So until then, thank you all for watching, and take care.